Alex, welcome. We appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time and the insights that you're going to give us today as we talk about your forays into social media and indeed social networks. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the background and some of the approaches that you've had as you started out the topic of the day. What is the network we're talking about? What is Alex Brown Racing? You know, where are we starting from with this?
Sure, and I appreciate obviously the invitation to come here. I actually used to work at Wharton, and I was a teacher at the University of Delaware, and I taught internet marketing. And concurrently, I've a passion for the horse racing industry, and I ride horses in the morning. So, you know, along the way, I'd always be experimenting with some blogs and some other web projects as I taught internet marketing. And I built a website for a racehorse trainer. I told the guy we would make it a blog, and this was kind of at the time when nobody really knew what a blog was. But I encouraged him that we'd build some traffic and some audience if he kept it updated. And we did that, and we got about 3 visits a day for about 2 years. So clearly it was an interesting idea, but we really didn't build any traffic. And then when Barbaro came back to Fair Hill after we won the Kentucky Derby, I suggested to my friend that we started blogging about Barbaro's preparation for the Preakness. And he agreed, and at the time I was teaching a class, so I bought some Google ads, and you know, with the students we followed the rise in the traffic based on the updates we provided, and we built the traffic up to about 120 visits a day going into the Preakness. And man, I was really excited. I could see something working, and it was pretty cool.
So when you first started, you said that the 3 visits a day. What year was that? How early was that in the blog evolution?
It was wasn't that early. I'd run a few projects before, but it was probably about 2003, 2004. But you know, we did some things wrong. You know, we updated once a month. You know, you're not going to get people coming back if you don't update on a regular basis. And I think the content was quite interesting, but we really didn't provide any glue to build an audience, I don't think.
Any other early lessons besides frequency? What else was it that drew attention?
I think, obviously, I think frequency is important. I think transparency is very important in this arena. You say it the way it is. You can't sugarcoat anything. Right. That just comes back and bites you later, I think. And there are other things, but certainly frequency, attention to your audience is very important.
What about linking outward? Now, blogs are usually the building blocks of
Yes.
social networks, right?
Yeah.
Was there an evolutionary step that you took looking forward, thinking, well, we should connect this in other areas, we should find ways to mesh out some sort of a network?
I certainly tried that in the early days before Barbaro came along, but you know, other people are resistant to link to you. You can say, well, we're the first racehorse trainer with a blog, and you know, they don't want to drive traffic to you necessarily. It's kind of interesting, the whole idea of what is the role of media and different websites building audiences or providing the best information. I think sometimes those two goals conflict. If your goal is simply to build an audience, you're reluctant to provide useful links. If your goal is to provide the best information, you're more likely to provide useful links, but those useful links drive your traffic somewhere else.
I think that's a very important differentiator there. What was the relationship you had with general media at the time? There's always a lot of coverage of the equestrian world. Did you have any kind of interplay with them? Again,
at that time, early days, very little relationship. I mean, some simply through my teaching of internet marketing, because again, I was a pretty early adopter of that subject matter. I had some interplay. But literally until Barbaro came along, I was a complete non-entity, so to speak.
And well, sometimes notoriety helps drive the traffic.
Yeah.
And from this, though, you've gone on to create really what I think is a very, very impressive network through the Alex Brown Racing brand, and a lot of the efforts that you have to help the equestrian world and some of the movements there. Maybe you can give us an overview of that too, and then we'll dig deeper into what the network's all about.
Sure. Sadly, the Preakness 2006, Barbaro broke his leg, and I think certainly everybody at Penn knows that, since he came to Penn's hospital at New Bolton Center. And my initial reaction to the tragic incident was to quit the project. I certainly wasn't going to exploit a bad situation simply because I knew there was going to be a lot of traffic, right? The following day, not to get into too much detail, but the following day, I was at a friend's house having Sunday dinner, and I just went onto my site, and I realized people were Googling Barbaro at a phenomenal rate and getting no information. I mean, the information out on the internet just wasn't there. And ironically, all the media was at New Bolton Center, but there was really nothing coming out of there. So I made a couple of phone calls to a couple of vets, put up some information, and then a vet called me back as soon as Barbaro came out of surgery. And along the way, I was updating the Google ads on what we were doing and so forth. So when people did Google Barbaro, they'd get my ad straight away, updated Barbaro information, come straight to my site. Right? So when Barbaro came out of surgery, 3,000 visits in an hour, the site crashed. Because I was on a free server, and you know, it's clearly at 3 visits a day, typically we weren't ready for 3,000 visits in an hour. So the next day I just determined that if I was going to do this, I was going to do it correctly. I was going to provide updates if I had the permission to provide them, and I would run with this project. And we know now, obviously 8 months later, sadly Barbaro didn't make it. But along the way, the site went from tracking Barbaro's time in New Bolton Center, and then we started talking about other horse welfare issues. And specifically, we're focused on the whole horse slaughter issue. So along the way, we started raising money for horse rescue and some other initiatives. And when Barbaro did pass away, I did think at that time it would probably end the project. But interestingly enough, it didn't. And the project's taken a whole new life. And we're clearly a website about horse welfare at this point. And we're actually quite a large player in that field. Along the way, I started off with a blog for about 3 months on its own after Barbaro broke his leg. We were getting 500 comments a day. And you really can't have good conversation when you're getting 500 comments in one blog post where people are trying to discuss a variety of different things. So I used some of my contacts when I worked at Wharton. I got a license from Prospero, a discussion board provider, and implemented a discussion board. Initially to some resistance because the community was used to one platform, the blog. Now I was asking them to shift to another platform and keep both. And the resistance was there for a while, but then they saw the value in the discussion board. If it wasn't for the discussion board, we wouldn't have been able to start raising money, and we've raised more than $1 million to date.
Well, let me ask you then, how do you feel the discussion board drove the revenue or the donation movement there?
I'll explain a little bit about how the fundraising model works. We're not a non-profit organization. In fact, we don't exist as an entity. I basically provide a medium for fundraising. A horse rescue can go to our discussion board and they can start a discussion thread, potentially, for example, about a couple of horses that might be in a kill pen on the way to slaughter, and they might need $1,000 to get those horses out of harm's way. And they'll provide the information, and various members of the community is actually called fans of Barbaro, will contribute $50, $20, $100. The money will be raised and the horses are then out of harm's way. I don't think you can do that on one sort of comment system. Like I would update the blog once a day with a new blog posting, and then just do various updates within that. So there just wasn't a medium at that point to do what we could do with a discussion board.
Did you find, after the initial resistance, that people took to the discussion board more so than they had on the commenting blog? And from your own strategic viewpoint, was there a difference between the information that you sent out via the blog and the conversation that sort of nurtured itself?
Right. Yeah, certainly very quickly the community realized the value of the discussion board. There are still community members, and there really is no such thing as a member, but people that use the community that only go to the blog or that only go to the discussion board now because they became part of the community after the discussion board was in place. So there is a little bit of that, but mostly they cross over pretty good now. I update the blog every day still, 3 or 4 times a day, and try not to get involved in any of the conversations on the discussion board, unless they're particular questions where I have some expertise, like galloping a horse, or you know, what's going on getting ready for the Triple Crown or something like that. It's very important for me as a moderator, and I now have 3 other moderators, to stay out of conversations.
Now, why do you feel that's important?
Because I don't want to put my footprint on the discussion board. The discussion board works because it's a lot of people talking about a lot of different issues, some of which they agree to agree and agree to disagree, but I think, you know, because it's quote-unquote my site, my word carries a degree of influence, probably more so than somebody else's. So because of that, I just stay out of the conversations to the extent that I can.
I think you're probably touching on a couple issues that are very, very important in the proper adoption of social media strategies. The community is in dialogue with itself. It grows on itself. They have a lot of value to add to it. Yet at the same time, you have, in essence, a brand, an oversight. So whether or not they're members of that brand is immaterial. They're galvanized by the topic, they're galvanized by the purpose. So you have the ability to give some expertise. And yet you can have the ability to listen and let that audience grow. I think it's worth noting too that you have some incredible statistics about the growth of this. I mean, you're in YouTube, you're on Facebook, you have thousands of friends in this type of environment. So you've gone from blog posting, you know, every now and then into a very vibrant aspect. What is it you think draws all these people together? Surely you haven't done any outward marketing to try and collect it. What is it that gets the, as a friend of mine would say, the canaries flying your way? What brings people to the site? I mean,
now what brings people to the site, I think, is the reputation of the site and the generosity of the community, the fans of Barbara. I think one way to capture this community and how it's grown is kind of like a positive virus. This is a community that does great things, and that intrigues people, and people come to the community and do good things because they see a lot of good things being done. So it feeds off of itself. And, you know, I talked a little bit about why we introduced the discussion board. You know, one of the roles that I think I do play in this community, which is important, is from a strategic standpoint, what sort of social media tools should we be using? And about 6 months ago, I decided that, you know, and we also have a wiki. We've had a wiki for a while in order to sort of aggregate content and sort of a depository for people to learn from what we've already done, right? But there was a decision about 6 months ago to adopt Facebook as a social networking tool for the community. And to me, I think that was important so we could reach out more to people that are interested in what we're doing, but wouldn't necessarily come to our websites on a daily basis. And the nice thing about Facebook is it does allow me to email out once a week, sort of a summary of things that are going on. So I'm quite interested in how Facebook has enabled us to sort of essentially accomplish 2 things. One, strengthen the ties within the community. So those within the community that are on Facebook can now learn more about each other. And secondly, to reach out to other people. And other people include media, for instance. It gives me a much stronger reach into media that are going to join our Facebook group, but they're not going to spend hours on our website every day. And that enables me to further get the word out and get connections. And you know, we created a YouTube group simply because a lot of our community likes to create video content, so why not enable some form of aggregation of that content? And we're now running a pretty cool YouTube contest, which I can go into a little bit more detail about. And most recently, we're now on Twitter. And Twitter is useful, I think, to sort of reach out again to sort of media types and others that wouldn't ordinarily go to our sites, and keep people updated with maybe some media coverage that we're getting, or some other sort of significant things that the fans of Barbara and Alex Brown Racing is trying to accomplish. So I think it's important when you look at these different tools, have goals for them and stick to that. I mean, I tried MySpace, didn't work, quit on it pretty quickly. You know, and if you're not prepared to make mistakes, you're not prepared to figure it out, right? So along the way, we've made some mistakes for sure.
Well, I was just about to ask that. How did you determine that it did or didn't work in the Facebook example?
Well, Facebook, I learned pretty quickly, and I could find my way around pretty easily. I still haven't figured out MySpace. So personally, I just couldn't figure it out. I don't think MySpace's demographic is as suitable for us as Facebook. We typically reach an older audience. My demographic are 50-year-old women to a large extent, which is quite interesting that they actually, a lot of them kind of learned the blogging environment through this project and the discussion boards through this project, and now going to Facebook through this project.
Very comfortable. So you helped educate them to be active participants in the community too. You made a comment earlier I think was very, very important, is the strategic adoption of these tools. It doesn't sound like you've just been willy-nilly about, you know, I'll grab it because it's buzzy. It sounds as though it fits in your overall community architecture very well. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how somebody with a brand or a purpose or a cause can make that strategic assessment.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult. I mean, I will say out of all the work that I've done when I worked at Wharton, at the University of Delaware, and other consulting work, this has been intellectually the hardest project I've ever worked on. And I think all my sort of experience in internet marketing was necessary for me not to make too many mistakes. How do I assess these tools strategically? Is a little bit of hit and miss, but the key is you have to experiment and you have to have clear goals for outcomes and to some extent measurable, and try to measure them. But I will also say, if you ask me how many members there are of our community, I wouldn't be able to give you a straight answer, and I wouldn't really care. Now, do I know page views? Do I know number of messages posted per day on the discussion board? Do I know dollars raised? I know all those metrics, and they're all important to me in the project to continue moving forward. So it's somewhat data-driven, but not probably as much as perhaps others would appreciate, I think.
Interesting aspect. The Wharton Interactive Media Initiative is all about examining the data generated by these types of platforms and the story that the data tells and how that can drive your business decision. But you have something else at work along with that strategic examination, I think, and it's the authenticity, right? The transparency and the passion that goes along with this particular topic. I don't know that you'd be able to fabricate this kind of uptake with the audience and the community that you have. How much of it do you see as a function of a need that's answered, a platform to give voice to all these people?
I mean, I think it is a huge function of what we're doing in terms of, you know, we're a horse welfare site essentially hosted by a racehorse, from a horse racing perspective. And that has been very important to tie people together. I'm very sort of, I'm convinced that we're successful because of the internet, and the internet provides two things for us. One is pure transparency. And transparency is just super critical, and the internet's provided that. And the other is connectedness and the social networking aspects of connectedness, obviously. But you combine transparency and connectedness, and now you have to have authenticity, as the word you use. You have to say it the way it is. And sadly, in the horse world, the horses need a voice, and it needs to be said the way it is so that we can get passionate about issues like horse slaughter. And at the end of the day, I absolutely believe we'll end that practice simply because of the combination of transparency and connectedness. We continue to grow, get more people involved, and the reasons that we have horse slaughter can no longer be sort of maintained because they're not authentic. And I'm not going to go into the political debates about the particular issue, but that's my belief and that's my passion, and that's why I think we are being successful, and we can continue to be more successful. But without this sort of the social networking side, it would be a lot harder.
You're able to pull all that passion together in almost a singular voice that gives that.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about your YouTube contest. Now, it's another platform yet, but again, it fits strategically in your mission.
It fits strategically in our mission, and it's an example of what I think is an interesting tactic. So if you get down to sort of, the goal, strategy, and some of the tactics we use in terms of the horse slaughter issue, one of my goals is simply getting the word out about horse slaughter. I'm not absolutely going to convince you whether it's a practice that should occur or shouldn't occur. My goal is that you know about it. Then you can make your own decision, right? But if you know about it through me, obviously some of the content's going to be biased toward my viewpoint, I guess, right? But the goal essentially is just make everybody aware. So in terms of the YouTube contest, I put up $1,000 for someone to create a YouTube video that essentially wins the contest. And what is the contest? It's to create a 1 to 4 minute video about the practice of horse slaughter. Now, I've written a 16-page essay on this practice. So one of my rules is you've got to read the essay, and then create a video about some piece of that essay, whether you agree with it, disagree with it, whatever it might be. And then I have certain other rules. Some are designed to get Google juice and search stuff, which is obviously very important. So in the title it has to have horse slaughter, for example, and some other stuff. And the other rules are designed for the more viral aspect of the internet, right? So how does the winner get judged? It's based on number of comments, number of views, and the rating, purely. So when the submission date's over, which is April 10th, there's a 1-month period till May 10th before the winner is judged based on some algorithm of that data. So my goal is people get incentivized to create a piece of content and then market it and get it out there and get other people to forward it and get it rated, get it on Google and so forth. And one other rule that I put in there is simply it's got to be PG-13. Nobody wants to read about or see video of horses getting slaughtered. Any kind of animal slaughter is going to be gross to look at, right? So I mean, that's not the point. The point is we need to create content that people will actually view and learn from, right? And I do believe that there's lots of horse slaughter content on YouTube that people absolutely won't view because they just don't want to be offended by what is a horrible experience.
But through this contest, you're able to enable your community, reach out to others, share on YouTube, raise awareness of the issue. Right? And I assume that the voting and ranking is done in the YouTube platform as well. So, and then you have nice interactivity between your site and YouTube, so you can hopefully generate some traffic.
And the cool thing is, for instance, I'll give you a very short example. Montana right now is trying to introduce some legislation that makes it easier to open up a slaughterhouse. One of the YouTube producers, I'll call them, is based in Montana, created a wonderful YouTube video about why horse slaughter shouldn't come to the great state with a big sky and all the beautiful stuff, right? And it's a really cool video. Because this is an ongoing issue and the governor of Montana has yet, as we speak, signed the bill, that video has gone viral. It's all over the internet. It's being blogged by pretty cool people. And it's being used to encourage people to watch it and to then call the governor of the state of Montana to request that he veto the bill. So it's a perfect example of what we're trying to do.
What's next for you? You mentioned Twitter already, but where do you see the evolution of the community going, and how do you feel like you can fulfill the needs of the people who are involved with it?
I mean, my goal is always every day, wake up and don't mess it up, right? I mean, it's a pretty basic goal, but it's very easy to mess this community up. I could ban the wrong person, that could create a massive adverse effect, and so on and so forth. So, what new tools will we look at? How will we continue to grow the network? I'm not sure I can really answer that, because if I knew that, we'd probably be already looking at it. But for instance, like Twitter, I knew about 2 years ago, but we only started using Twitter a couple of months ago. So I spend quite a lot of time thinking about that kind of stuff. But my goal, like we have 1,000 members of the group on Facebook. I'd like that to be 5,000. We have, you know, there's only a couple of hundred people currently following us on Twitter. I'd like that to be 500. You know, these goals probably by the end of this year. So it's goals within what we're currently doing. You know, our discussion board has 1 million posts. We get about 1,200 posts a day. Let's, you know, grow that to 2 million. You know, and the blog. To be honest, I don't even follow the blog page views anymore. I had to take SiteMeter off because they had a bug in their program once, and I never put it back on. So you know, I have some pretty strong goals, but you know, you also have to be pretty flexible in this environment. I mean, who knows? Twitter, I don't know if it'll last, whether it will. I don't even know what their business model is, so they need to have a business model to stick around. So I don't know how, you know, invested you can be in some of these things. And our blogging platform's free. Everything that we're doing is free. So I'm always concerned that we'll get the carpet pulled, you know, the rug pulled out under us at some point. But, you know, along the way, you focus on the brand, Alex Brown Racing. So if something does, if we are interrupted, as it were, hopefully that brand is now gained enough strength that we can come back in another form.
Well, you're shored up by a very valuable, very vocal, and very growing community.
Yeah.
So I think you've got a lot that will keep you afloat for a long time to come. Alex, we appreciate your time with us today and your insights on how to work these social networks in the right direction. Alex of Alex Brown Racing, we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right. Some tremendous insights from Alex Brown today on how to nurture and build a community and leverage the strength of social media and social networks moving forward. I think a couple of the key points that he made revolves a lot around his mission statement, the ability that this community is drawn together for a purpose. It's not fabricated. There aren't artificial tools. There's authenticity, there's trust, there's information, there's value to the community. I think it's also really important to understand that Alex and his team experimented. They grew, and they did it strategically, looking at the tools that are available in the social media construct. The Twitters, the blogs, the social networks, the Facebook, all these things weren't just thrown together. In fact, you know, they were very strategically designed to help power the community. So through a strong mission statement, a strong galvanizing factor, it's very apparent that brands can really pull together a strong network, a community that functions, a community that gets things done. I think some of those really interesting frontline aspects are very valuable and can be extrapolated to other business models.